Hi there, Ischa here, and welcome to the Higher Life, where we explore concepts considered spiritual, esoteric, psychological, and new age, and unpack how they actually become very powerful tools to live as an empowered human being. That is a human being that is free from reactivity, free from using your precious daily energy to sustain a version of self that is very fearful, very insecure, and that relates to themselves, to others, and to life in a very transactional way. Being empowered means that you've come into your true self and that you are living out your daily life in your full personal power. And this brings us always into a focus on what is our personal power. How can we identify it and cultivate it and then live through this power in our daily lives? And one of the most important phases or stages in becoming empowered is understanding what drives the way we use our energy as we move through our life span, from being a child through to becoming an adult and into an elder. I believe through the work that I've been doing that there are two primary conditions of being human that drive the way that we act in the world, the way we use our energy. The first one is our sensitivity. Being human means that you're born into a physical body that can sense, it can feel, it can experience physical suffering and pain and joy and pleasure. So we are a sensory being, and we learn about our world and about ourselves through our senses in our early phases of life. So before we have a fully cognitive mind, before we can separate our experience from who we are simply experiencers. A baby is born into a earth plane or a physical plane in which their physicality is the first thing that they become aware of. So if you're a baby born into a very comfortable, loving environment and your senses, you're absorbing this gentleness, this tenderness, this stability, this serenity in your immediate experience of being in the world right through your childhood, that energy, that vibration will be what conditions your own personal vibration, your own personal experience of being in the world. If you're a baby born into a high conflict situation, or for some reason or another experienced physical discomfort or pain or suffering, that then becomes part of the patterning that you understand the world to be. So if you're born into a very fearful experience, you might understand the world to be a fearful place. If you're born into an experience of feeling very at ease and very taken care of and very comforted and very loved, the world will be a very friendly place. Now, these might be not 100% true for every single human being born into these conditions. But what we're really speaking to here is that sensitivity is a shared human experience. We are sensitive to experience, we're sensitive to pain, we're sensitive to pleasure, and therefore it makes sense that it cultivates an inner self called a seeker, who is following this energy of seeking out either ways to protect from the sensitivity or to enhance the sensitivity through pleasurable acts. And we really can get very locked into leading our lives through this relationship we're having to our own sensitivity. In a immature, ignorant state, our sensitivity drives our life. That is either protecting ourselves from it or chasing more heightened states of it. And we've heard about this in spiritual teachings, such as the teachings of Buddha, that talk about this cycle of avoiding pain and seeking out pleasure. But in fact, what we want to do is cut to the core of what drives us to behave in that way in the first place. If we were insensitive beings, that is, we had no sensitivity, or we didn't sense our experience, we probably wouldn't have that pattern as a very active pattern in the collective. So sensitivity is something that is a natural part of our makeup. We cannot escape it. Now, as we have a mind, or we experience ourselves through a mind that has the ability to almost separate us from our senses, we have learnt over time the skill of disassociation, which is ways in which we can live in the world as a human being in a physical body, but almost not feel or sense our experience, almost be numb to that aspect of our humanity. And we see the evidence of that. And I'm very much an evidence-driven guide in that I like to look out into the world and let it reflect back to me the obvious. If we are in a period of humanity in which, although we are not as ignorant as we once were, we still kill and harm and maim others in service of our own beliefs, it would suggest that we are living in a state of numbness. Anybody who can witness people being murdered or participate in the name of an idea or an ideology or a belief must be driven by a certain amount of desensitivity. Sensitivity, we would embrace and take in the grief of such a tragic way of being in the world. And it is our sensitivity also that has created the most beautiful artworks and poetry, and has helped us as human beings to kind of express our sensitivity in words, in language, in imagery, and that's given us a lot of enrichment as a species. So the sensitivity, it is part of our DNA, it's part of our makeup. It's an important part because it allows us to fully experience ourselves as living beings. And when we are disassociated or numbed from that aspect of our human makeup, we cannot live fully. We cannot have a big hearted life because our heart is closed off in order to protect us from that sensitivity. So opening your heart requires aligning with that sensitivity and living in a deep state of sensitivity without fearing the impact of being sensitive. And this is something that we can cultivate along the path of empowerment. Once we understand that personal power is our capacity to be in the world with a fully open heart, available to life, and in a true state of intimacy with ourselves and others, our sensitivity becomes one of the most important tools. A sensitive soul, one would say. Then the other driver is curiosity. Humans are born curious. The energy that we are has a natural desire to evolve and expand and to build off itself continually. You know, it doesn't regress. It may appear to regress superficially, but when it regresses, it's always carrying with it the wisdom of the previous expansion or evolution. And this is true for us as human beings, which this education path that we're on together really dives deep into. How as human beings, that curiosity has taken us out into the world and manifested more complicated versions of ourselves and our life out into this material experience that we can all view and sense and share. We call it the collective or the consensus reality. That is a natural outcome of this curiosity, and children are very curious. We're born with this really heightened sense of sensitivity and curiosity, and as children we're very playful because of that, very open. And this is the ideal child, of course, because many children are born into a fear state based very quickly and maybe never have the experience of being in this very open, exuberant, childlike, sensitive state. But it is the true nature of a human being. And when we speak to our true self, we're speaking to that curiosity and that sensitivity arising out of equanimity. That is, we are still very sensitive and very curious beings, but there's an equanimity, there's a an absence of agenda of seeking. So the curiosity is no longer driven by seeking. The sensitivity is no longer driven by suffering. We've somehow managed to face those agendas and dissolve them so that all that we're left with is pure curiosity and pure sensitivity. And that is the work of the seeker who has now ceased seeking and has turned back and has faced the seeker that seeks and has realized, oh, seeker, what you are is a creator or a seeker to be free of suffering. So to put that more eloquently, the seeker can be two identities that we can naturally relate to in modern life. That seeker can be operating out of a curiosity to expand and evolve and to improve and progress, or that seeker may be more of a victim self that is trying to free and heal itself from perceived suffering, from the suffering or wounding that its early years of sensitivity incurred. So you can see how that agenda is very strong and very alive in the human system right now. In the world of personal, transpersonal coaching, you do end up in two worlds at once. There's a very practical aspect to personal coaching, which is all about living your best life through your potential, and your potential is seen or viewed as your gifts or your talents. You're seen, you want to develop yourself by doing courses or getting promotions or having a vibrant career or artistic or family life. There's that very progressive way of fulfilling your potential. And then you'll have this other realm where it's a lot about a spiritual or emotional healing process, or a desire to understand how to transcend suffering in your life. And I think that most of the people that I have worked with over the years have fallen into one or two or both of these brackets, seeking to escape or understand their suffering and to heal or to create some kind of solutions that will resolve human suffering, or to really advance themselves in one way or another through lifestyle, through talent, through their service to society. And both of these seekers, both of these identities, the victim and the creator, are driven by seeking that is very agenda driven. And in this, it feeds into a false, insecure self, because the agenda is always based on the idea that there is more to be done. We must be healed, or we must advance ourselves in order to achieve our highest potential. But in fact, there is a kind of misunderstanding there, that seeking is in fact just a phase in our evolution. It is a part of our learning journey. When we're out in the world as a seeker from baby through to adulthood, we are learning about our own humanity. We are learning about the way our sensitivity works in the world and the kind of strategies that our mind comes up with to control and manage it. We are learning about this inner, expansive, curious nature that wants to continue moving and transforming and wanting. And those energies create this really vibrant storyline, our personal storyline and a collective storyline that we know as the human story. And we then love to engage with the enrichment aspects of this story, talking about our highs and lows and sharing our emotional experiences together, and we're having this really colorful experience of being alive. But the aliveness really comes back into being human, being an energy being in a physical body, and being able to be really available to the experience and to the storyline that you're in, without over-identifying with it as good or bad or powerful or disempowering. It's simply an experience that you're having, and at some point that experience, it reaches a kind of maturity in which you don't need to be in that learning process anymore. The seeking is no longer giving you the kind of wisdom or insight or growth opportunity that it once was. And that's the pause. That's the invitation to pause and really simply sit with all that expansion And I find this difficult to do myself sometimes, to really sit with how much I have learned and experienced and transformed from baby till becoming almost 50 this year. And that pause can take time. And the pause invites in a new focus. And that new focus is an expansion and evolution. However, it's an involution. Instead of projecting yourself out into the world and progressing out into the world and advancing on your personality or your persona, you suddenly turn inwards and think, oh, what has been driving all this seeking in my life? Who are these selves that operate from this agenda, this seeking agenda? And you see this creator and this victim, these two selves, the sensitivity of the victim and the curiosity of the creator. And you meet them, you say, wow, what a job you've done for me. It's pretty amazing. Who are you? And you engage in a kind of dialogue, and you start to explore how these selves manifest in your life. You know, where did they come from? And you travel back through the layers of self, which is an actual process of identifying your physical self and some of the physical attributes of your human life, your gender, your race, where you grew up, the personal storyline that you're in. But then you travel into, well, what are these core qualities or virtues that make up my personality that I was born with? And how did that happen? And then what are these energy patterns that really influence the way I communicate and the way I perceive in the world? And these are archetypal. And you can see that we're getting kind of deeper and deeper into the patterning, and also closer and closer to what would be called the true self, the self of equanimity before these patterned selves arise up and become a personal self. So in a way, we're traveling back to understand, how is a personal self created? And this process is the empowerment process, because you're empowering the true self by dissolving all those layers of false self. And when that true self emerges, they meet their outer reality in a completely different way and transform it in that relationship. So this phase of the journey is always about identifying that there is a seeker with an agenda, that it manifests in a proactive way as the creator, and in a perhaps a more reactive way as a victim. And that it is not a bad thing to be a victim. We all have that victim aspect, because we've all been a victim of our own sensitivity, whether it's been physical, emotional, psychological, energetic, or psychic. It is a real experience that we go through, and it shapes us, and it can shape our false self, and it can educate our true self. And we're in the process of personal empowerment. We're simply discerning between the two realities: the false reality, in which our false self is invited into and is reinforced, and our true reality, our reality of equanimity, where we are all unique human beings in a shared purpose to fulfill the highest potential of humanity in this time in history. Every generation has its work to do, and the generation that is currently unfolding right now, it is very much about examining how human power works in the world, and disassociating and detaching from a false power system, ones that have been collectively created, agreed upon, and reinforced, and our false selves play out in that reality. So it's very easy to dissolve a reality based on inequality and injustice, and doesn't have our best interests at heart, by simply dissolving the self that plays out in that particular version of reality, and in the process returning to your true self, and therefore energizing our true nature as a species and our true nature as a human being, aligning back into nature, where we live fully with our sensitivity and curiosity in an agenda-free way. And really, we don't know how that's going to be, because it's an evolution or an expansion that's underway. It's an unknown state for all of humanity to be truly empowered. It is the highest agenda at this time. Now, obviously, if we reach that state of pure empowerment, a new agenda, a new purpose may naturally unfold, and that's for the generations to come to discover. The work that we do now here along the path of empowerment, the empowered way, is specifically for this group of humans in this time of history where we're being asked to claim back our personal power. However, we need to do that by traveling along the path of personal empowerment and integrating the wisdom and the education and the enriching experiences that our journey through the not self or the false self has actually activated within us. We don't want to lose our experience to return back into equanimity. We want to return to equanimity matured by the experience that we've been through. It's such a beautiful journey to be on. If you're curious to know more, absolutely check out the work we're doing at the Higher Life Academy. Until next time, take care and love life.